Is because we record it. Otherwise, obviously, we can all hear each other in here. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our current edition of our noon forum. Today, we're commemorating, celebrating the OXI Day, and the very important day of very big significance in world history, what that little small nation Greece did back on October 28, 1940. So we welcome you here at Hellenic House today. There are many facets, obviously, of OXI Day and Greece in World War II, which one of them is the Greek war relief effort and the America's formidable response to that famine that took place during World War II. And that's what our speaker today, Jim Marketos, will discuss. But it is important to note a little bit of historical significance regarding what took place on October 28th, when Italy, Mussolini, the Duce, as he was referred to, felt somewhat inferior to his senior partner, where the roles were sort of reversed, where in the beginning he was the junior partner when the fascist movement came to be in the early 30s in Europe. He quickly became the junior partner, and he wanted to show Mr. Hitler and others that he can do just as good as the Nazi war machine. So he decided that he's going to give an ultimatum to little old Greece and say we're going to walk in and we're going to take over. And he gave his ambassador instructions in the morning at 4 a.m. to go visit the Prime Minister of Greece, Mr. Marketos, and to say you have 1 hour to give us your country. And if I recall, Mr. Marketos said something to the effect, sir, that I couldn't even give you my house in 1 hour, let alone my country. And then he famously referred to in French, and I can't remember the French terminology, but it comes to then it is war. He really didn't say no, he said then it is war, but of course it's become known as OXI, and it's a little bit more, cachet is to say OXI. Be it as it may, little old Greece pushed back that whole Italian army, that very strong, formidable opponent of over 500,000 men, mechanized units, into the mountains of Albania, and for months not only pushed them back, held them at bay, and really was victorious, providing the Allies with the first victory of World War II. To my dismay, it's still not well known regarding what Greece did in 1940 regarding this very significant victory over Allied forces, over Nazi forces. And to illustrate the point, when I was on a tour in Paris back in 2009 with my daughter, I've always wanted to go to the beaches of Normandy. And I think every man in the free world should visit the beaches of Normandy. We owe it to those people who died on those shores for us to be able to be here today. And it's unfathomable what those people must have suffered, unspeakable horrors on that beach. But be it as it may, thank God there were people like that for us to be able to enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy here today. So I felt that, that I needed to go and to pay homage, frankly, and tribute to those people. And I took my daughter with me. To my dismay, however, in traveling to Normandy on that particular day on this tour bus, the lady who was our tour guide started recalling some vignettes of World War II. And then she started talking about the first victories of World War II. And she mentioned El Alamein and Midway Island. And I kind of woke up because I was a little bit in a sleep. It was early in the morning. And I approached her after the first rest stop we had, and I said, listen, madam, I heard your comments, and I'd like to bring to your attention October 28th, 1940, and what the Greek nation did. And that is generally considered to be by, military historians and experts who care to give the time of day, that this was the first Allied victory of World War II. And she goes, oh, yes, you're absolutely right. But she did not come back on the bus, okay, and to clarify that. I took it upon myself to write the French ambassador here, a letter as a matter of fact, asking him not necessarily to be an overseer of the French tourist industry, but nonetheless to bring it to his attention. And I was curious to see what kind of reply that he would give me. I got a zero reply. And that really was disturbing. That I didn't even get a pro forma response back from the French ambassador on an official letter that I wrote on my stationery from here from the American Hellenic Institute. Be it as it may, we all know about the delay from April to June of Operation Barbarossa regarding Germany, how to divert over 1,000 planes, representing 20% of its air force, and approximately 28 divisions to come to Greece and to come to the rescue of his cohort, Mussolini, and to go into Greece, into the Balkan Peninsula. That delay has been attributed for the delay of Operation Barbarossa and for the eventual downfall and ultimately retreat and defeat of Nazi Germany and Hitler's powerful war machine. And it's a story that's just not well told in the Western world. So this is why at the American Hellenic Institute we try to celebrate, commemorate this day on an annual basis. And we've taken a lot of stride in trying to present this in other ways as well. 5 publications of our foundation have been dedicated specifically to this subject matter, meaning World War II, including a book on Greece's contributions to World War II, and then, frankly, why Greece is important also to the United States today. Our speaker today also was instrumental in helping us do this documentary, about a 12-minute documentary on something that was only recently uncovered. And that was these Greek-American operational groups, these clandestine forces that went behind enemy lines, that were dropped behind enemy lines during World War II to wreak havoc upon the retreat of the Germans from Greece. And this was done by Mr. Marketos, and we thank him very much for that particular documentary that he was able to put together. Without further ado, what I'd like to do now is call upon Jim to talk about this particular area of Greek war relief. But a little bit about Jim. He's a partner in the Washington, D.C. law firm of Berliner, Corcoran & Rowe. He specializes in corporate litigation. He received his bachelor's degree from Princeton University and his Juris Doctorate degree from New York University, where he was the co-editor-in-chief of the Annual Survey of American Law and received the law school's Vanderbilt Medal. I did not know that, Jim. Before entering private practice of law, he is a member of the New York and District of Columbia bars and is admitted to practice in the Supreme Court of the United States and numerous lower federal courts. He has been a former chairman of the American Hellenic Institute, and now he continues to serve on our board of directors. He makes his home here in D.C. with his wife Denise and their son Alexander, and he's a tremendous asset to the American Hellenic Institute, and someone who really, I think, on the side you can, proclaim him as being a historian in his own right, because he really delves into the annals of history to come up with a lot of interesting ideas, including Columbus and how maybe he came to be, maybe he came from Greece somewhere, right, Jim? But that's for another day. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Marketos, thank you.
Thank you, Nick, and welcome everyone. I think it's fitting to recall, before I begin my remarks on Greek war relief, how the New York Times marked Greek Independence Day 1941, March 25th that would be. That's while this whole episode that started October 28th was still very much going on. Let me read you how they commemorated that event. And I'm quoting now: "She did not go into her present war as a democracy. She did not take up arms willingly. Few expected from her more than a few weeks' resistance, a brave but brief gesture for freedom that would have to be recognized when the post-war settlement was made. She has surprised the world, revealed Mussolini's pitiful weakness, upset Hitler's plans. It is a poignant irony of our time that the will to resist should be so vehement in this little half-armed nation, whereas in some greater nations it hardly existed at all. Greece has struck her modern blow for freedom not in blind fury, but with impassioned skill. She has done the unpredictable, achieved the impossible. She has lighted a flame as bright as that which burned at Dunkirk and over London, as bright as any that lit freedom's skies over Thermopylae, Salamis, and Marathon. She may go down underneath overwhelming force, but it is as certain as tomorrow's dawn that she cannot be permanently enslaved. Wow, they really got everybody's attention. So, I'm going to take it for granted, based on what you already know and what Nick has just said, that you know exactly what happened exactly 73 years ago today in the opening phases of World War II, when Greece gave its resounding no to Mussolini, and how Italy completely misjudged the Greek spirit and didn't grasp that Greeks were willing to die for the sake of dignity and freedom, and how over the ensuing 6 months until April 1941, Greece's vastly outgunned and largely unmechanized military successfully repelled Mussolini's 8 million bayonets, he used to say, and electrified the free world, proving that fascism, which till then seemed invincible, could in fact be defeated. So today I'm going to speak of an American aspect of OXI Day, which is Greek war relief. It's a remarkable story of how a relatively small ethnic group whose roots in American soil were not yet very deep responded quickly and effectively to a wartime emergency by raising millions of dollars to save lives during Greece's occupation by Axis forces, and continued after the war to furnish desperately needed food, medical supplies, and other relief through Greece's bitter Civil War years and the rebuilding that followed in the 1950s. Greek war relief was a shining but now mostly forgotten moment in the history of the Greek American community. Today I'll give you a little flavor of how these remarkable volunteers successfully came to the aid of Greece at a time of need. First, a little context, and forgive me for repeating a little of what Nick has said, but it'll help you understand where Greek war relief was coming from. Having failed to occupy Greece, Mussolini had no choice but to ask Hitler for help, and the Nazi attack came from Bulgaria on April 6, 1941. That happened to be Palm Sunday. With British help, the Greeks resisted bravely, but they could not stop Hitler's panzer divisions, and the swastika was hoisted on the Acropolis on April 27. With British and Anzac aid, Crete held out until the end of May against the largest airborne assault in history. For the remainder of the war until liberation in December 1944, Greece was occupied in German, Italian, and Bulgarian zones. Immediately upon arrival, the occupying forces took food and whatever else they liked, including all means of transport. Besides plundering, they requisitioned huge quantities of food and goods for shipment north at the orders of the Wehrmacht High Command. As a result, unemployment quickly jumped, industrial output plummeted, rampant inflation set in, and food supplies disappeared. An American relief worker in Athens at the time described how, even before Crete fell, the food situation in Athens had become desperate. I'm quoting now from something he wrote on May 11, 1941. Another week, this is a quotation, another week of Axis occupation ended with no salt in the market, many meat and vegetable shops closed, and the bread ration cut from 80 to 60 drams, which is less than 6 ounces, per person, when formerly the average workman consumed about 3 pounds daily as his principal diet. And then again, a little more than a month later, he wrote, the 8th week of occupation ended with a riot near the stadium, where a crowd of women mobbed an Italian truckload of bread stalled by a streetcar across its path. Those of you who've been to Athens can imagine that scene. There was only one guard who feared to shoot. Next time, there will be more guards and some shooting, no doubt. By the autumn and winter of 1941, Greece was starving. The death toll from starvation and typhoid, typhus, cholera, pneumonia, and dysentery had risen to more than 1,500 persons daily in Athens and Piraeus alone. By the following spring, the death rate from starvation in Athens and Piraeus exceeded 2,000 a day. Of every 10 children born, only one lived more than 4 weeks. Within 10 days after the Italian attack on Greece, prominent Greek Americans organized the Greek War Relief Association to relieve the dreadful conditions that already existed in Greece and were sure to continue as long as war conditions lasted. A week later, they had arranged with the AHEPA for district governors to send an urgent telegram to all chapters. I quote, "You are fraternally commanded and personally requested to commence immediately an AHEPA drive in your district to collect funds for relief to the Greek motherland, the victim of unprovoked aggression. Take proper steps, organize chapter committee, invite assistance and collaboration of prominent persons of non-Hellenic descent, and mobilize public opinion through press, theater, radio, churches of all denominations, and chapters of national fraternal organizations. Now is the time to show our spirit, act at once and wisely." End quote. The desperate situation in Greece aroused the sympathies of ordinary Americans. At first, local committees raised funds by direct solicitation through radio and newspaper appeals. Then, in 1941 and 1942, the local committees raised funds by including Greek war relief in local community chests and the United War Chest. The Community Chest National Budget Committee identified Greek war relief as the most insistent and urgent appeal presented by any relief group. Through this arrangement, the community chests allocated an annual sum to Greek war relief, and where this arrangement was in place, local solicitation was prohibited. By August 1942, Greek war relief and the community chests were cooperating effectively. Contributions poured in. By February 1943, Greek war relief efforts were beginning to turn the tide. The Greek starvation rate had been reduced by 2/3, and relief foods were being distributed in all provinces and in the Greek islands. By May 1943, Greek war relief was hailing its 5 millionth bushel of wheat shipped to Greece. In April of that year, Greek war relief joined 19 other privately organized war relief agencies in the National War Fund. This fund, formed at President Roosevelt's direction, took over responsibility for the budgets of Greek war relief and the other member agencies. From the fall of 43 through 1946, the National War Fund raised money through coordinated local war chest campaigns around the country. Local committees were responsible for getting Greek war relief admitted to the local war chest and seeing that it received a fair quota. And they were urged to work for the success of the local war chest drives. Every effort was made to ensure that the lion's share of contributions were dedicated to securing relief supplies for Greece. Official correspondence, for example, was typed on the blank reverse side of out-of-date stationery. Through mid-1943, Greek war relief's administrative costs were less than 6% of gifts. Greek war relief's shipping arrangements were rather unusual. With the Axis occupation of Greece beginning in April 1941, Great Britain blockaded all shipping lanes and refused to loosen the blockade for the sake of starving Greece. A solution was found when Greek war relief's leaders proposed that a neutral party functioning in Greece could oversee the distribution of relief supplies. As a condition for accepting the plan, the Nazis insisted that the people of Greece not be informed that the supplies came from the people of the United States and Canada. The plan was implemented by the Swedish Red Cross, putting a fleet of 8 Swedish vessels at the disposal of Greek war relief beginning in August 1942. Over the course of 2.5 years, these ships made more than 100 voyages, often originating in neutral Turkey, but some direct from New York and Canada. They delivered 700,000 tons of desperately needed food, clothing, medicine, and other vital supplies to the Joint Commission of the Swedish and Swiss Red Cross Societies, which was in charge of distributing relief supplies in Greece. Not until after liberation, in December 1944, did the Greek people learn that more than $30 million in relief supplies had reached them due to the efforts of the American people through the work of Greek war relief. Archbishop Damaskinos of Athens, who was briefly head of the Greek government, estimated that this relief saved fully 1/3 of the Greek population from death. Apart from soliciting cash contributions for food, Greek war relief also undertook clothing drives. The goal of one such drive was to send 20 million garments to Greece. Local committees received ready-made press kits to get the word out to newspapers and radio stations. State-by-state pie charts published in the association's monthly newsletters kept the local committees abreast of progress. In addition to bulk shipments of 7 million articles of clothing and shoes, 33,000 individual clothing packages were received at the Greek War Relief Warehouse and forwarded to individuals in Greece. By the end of the war, Greek War Relief had established 150 community medical clinics throughout Greece, each serving a population of 6,000 to 10,000 people. 18 mobile medical units, fully equipped and staffed by Greek War Relief, were in operation. Coincidentally, among the sponsors of these units was the Philoptochos Society of St. Sophia Cathedral, right here in Washington. Sites had been selected for 25 permanent health centers, and land was in the process of expropriation. In 1946, Greece again faced starvation, and once again Greek War Relief stepped forward. Child feeding stations were opened in Epirus and Macedonia. Their goal was to feed 250,000 children with one nourishing meal each day by the spring of '46. By August that year, the program was feeding hot noon meals to 92,000 children between ages 2 and 6, and more than 422,000 children between ages 6 and 14. During the war and occupation, 325,000 Greek boys and girls lost either a father or a mother, and more than 45,000 were robbed of both. Under Greek War Relief's 1946 Orphan Support Program, $80 cared for one child for a year. During the 6-month Give an Animal to Greece program, launched that in February of '46, and undertaken through a special arrangement with the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, Greek War Relief allowed more than 9,500 American donors to purchase almost 11,000 mules, horses, and cows, valued at about $1.4 million, to restore Greece's war-decimated herds and draft animal stocks. Another program that year provided for the shipment of food parcels directly to friends and family members in Greece. Packages cost $12.75 and weighed about 35 pounds. The price included the cost of packing, shipping, insurance, and delivery to any part of Greece. By special arrangement with the Greek government, a continuous flow of these parcels entered Greece without custom inspection or duty. As soon as a purchaser's money order was received, Greek War Relief cabled its Athens office, which moved packages out of its Greek warehouse so that the recipient could expect to receive a parcel in 2 to 3 weeks from the time it was ordered in the U.S. Sometimes deliveries were made using Greek War Relief's own trucks. Island deliveries were made with Greek War Relief's own vessel, a converted naval convoy escort that flew the American flag, sailed under American registry, and was manned by an American crew. My investigation drops off as of February 1947. That's when Greek War Relief became a member agency of CARE. You remember CARE. It was originally the Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe and later became the Cooperative for Assistance and Relief Everywhere. By any standard of measurement, Greek War Relief was a stunning success. Within 6 months after the Italian attack on Greece, the organization collected more than $4 million. Depending on which internet calculator you use, that's somewhere between 54 and 62 million of today's dollars. How did they accomplish such a remarkable success? It was due in no small part to Greek War Relief's national leaders, who were well assimilated into the mainstream business community, especially in entertainment. Their ability to quickly mobilize sophisticated mass communication skills allowed them to raise huge sums on a sustained basis for the relief of Greece. The leadership also had great connections, and through them, they were able to enlist active support at the highest levels of American society. Within 3 months of the association's founding, its National Citizens Committee reflected a cross-section of the top ranks of American business, academia, politics, the arts, and society. Listen to some of the names. Winthrop Aldrich, chairman of Chase National Bank. Nicholas Murray Butler, president of Columbia University. Carl Blagan, the renowned excavator of Troy and Pylos. Mrs. Andrew Carnegie, Mrs. Roosevelt, Mrs. Coolidge, Will Durant, the famous historian and philosopher, Samuel Goldwyn, Jack Warner, Darrell Zanuck, and David O. Selznick, the major players in Hollywood. William Randolph Hearst, Arthur Hayes Salzberger, and John Hay Whitney, publishers of the major U.S. newspapers. And it goes on and on like that. Of the 400 members of the National Citizens Committee, only 19 names were Greek. And many of these important people were not mere figureheads. Harold S. Vanderbilt, for instance, president of the New York Central Railroad, served as honorary chairman of Greek War Relief's National Committee throughout the war. He diligently engaged in the association's activities and contributed his social cachet to its success, such as by hosting a dinner for Greece's King George II when he visited New York in mid-1942. From Greek War Relief's national headquarters at 730 Fifth Avenue in New York, monthly newsletters and a steady flow of press releases, radio scripts, sample solicitation letters, sample letterhead, sample organizational charts for local committees, pamphlets, leaflets, posters, buttons, specially designed men's lapel pins and ladies' brooches, clothing labels, shipping labels, matchbook covers, contribution forms, contribution boxes, authorization cards for solicitors, receipt booklets, and other such useful materials poured out for the aid of local fundraising committees. The local committees were kept regularly abreast of the dreadful state of affairs in Greece, the quantities of funds being raised competitively in each state, how funds were being utilized in Greece, and what stateside events were being planned to keep the fundraising effort in the forefront of people's minds. Most communications were in English, but as time went on, monthly newsletters were issued in both English and Greek. The local committees were given detailed instructions on how to give speeches, gain effective publicity, organize sporting events, conduct radio interviews, put on banquets, utilize tributes furnished by famous authors and columnists, and use theaters for fundraising purposes. The national leadership produced movie trailers and short features for local showings. Photographic mats and advertising copy were made available to aid daily and weekly newspapers in distributing illustrated news stories. The level of detail is shown by these excerpts from instructional materials distributed for purposes of organizing movie theater events. I quote, "Arrange for the most suitable theater in as many localities as possible for a midnight show, which should consist of a picture, vaudeville acts, amateurs, orchestras, nightclub entertainers, high school orchestras, and any tie-ups possible to get the maximum audience for that midnight show. In order to enhance the attractiveness of the girls in the lobby taking collections, we have decided to send you distinctive headgear similar to that worn by the Red Cross. This will be in light blue and white, which are the Greek colors, and will have the Greek insignia. In addition, these girls will have buttons and flowers to be given to the men and women as their donations are made." Close quote. Greek War Relief's fundraising events could count on support from top-name entertainers and political figures. 5 great national events were arranged in the first year alone: a Hollywood radio broadcast, a national banquet, a national charity ball, a motion picture theater benefit, and a national tag day. The first of these, a 90-minute radio extravaganza titled America Calling, was arranged by Hollywood producer Samuel Goldwyn and was hosted by Jack Benny and Bob Hope. Music was furnished by a 75-piece orchestra and a chorus of 35 voices. The announcement to the local committees not only boasted that it would be one of the finest shows ever broadcast, with practically all outstanding Hollywood personalities participating, but also provided guidance on how to leverage the broadcast into contributions. A sampling of the Hollywood luminaries who participated in the America Calling broadcast reveals how effectively Greek War Relief made Greece's wartime plight a topic of mainstream interest and importance. Mickey Rooney, Betty Davis, Fanny Price, George Burns and Gracie Allen, Clark Gable, Charles Lawton, Carol Lombard, Myrna Loy, Mary Martin, Groucho Marx, Paul Muni, Merle Oberon, Eddie Anderson, better known as Rochester, Jimmy Stewart, Shirley Temple, Spencer Tracy, and again, the list goes on and on. They were the top people of the day. When it is considered that Greek War Relief was just one among many worthy targets for wartime giving and volunteerism, and that its activities were conducted not with computers, cell phones, and the internet, but with manual typewriters, carbon copies, offset printers, rotary dial telephones, and telegrams, the level of its success is astounding. Thanks to the skill of its national leaders and the hard work of the local committees, Greek War Relief achieved results wildly out of proportion to the size of the ethnic community whose personal interests were at stake. As a result, millions of dollars were raised and millions of lives were saved. Looking back from November 1946, Greek war relief could proudly tally about $5.6 million in funds raised, which did not include the $5 million animal program, clothing packages worth $3 million, food packages worth more than $1.25 million, or the cost of management and operation of the Swedish ships. Greek war relief succeeded so well because it was able to make Greece's plight a subject of national interest and importance. Its inspiration and its challenge was Greece's heroic example of sacrifice for the sake of freedom. Here's how Greek War Relief's National Secretary summed it up in a late 1943 speech. I quote, "Only one force could have impelled this virtual miracle, and that force was the challenge of the sacrifice made by the Greek people, who were the first to break the evil spell that had burdened the soul of humanity by administering to the Axis its first major defeat on land. It was the challenge of their unhesitating and unfaltering determination to continue their centuries-long fight for freedom, their proud choice of death in preference to slavery, and finally their refusal to accept the ignominious role of a conquered nation." End of quote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim, for bringing to light a subject matter that we don't necessarily hear too much about or even know that much about, and some of the figures that you quote are really extraordinary in terms of the potential of millions, tens of millions of dollars that they come out to today. Let me ask, we'll open the floor for a second, just please identify who you are and ask the question. Can you shed a little bit more light as to, and obviously in any theater of war operation there's going to be problem for the local citizens to require the most basic of elements, food and so forth. Why did the Germans was it reprisals because of the way the Greece stood up to them that they just took away all the food?
I don't know.
It wasn't the same in any other part of Europe, was it?
I'll be candid with you, Nick. I don't know the answer to that question, but Mark Mezzauer, a scholar at, I think he's at Columbia now, has written a wonderful book on that very subject. And he describes the conditions that prevailed in Greece, and I don't know if he gives an answer. He must give an answer to the why question. Why did they do it, and why did they do it in Greece with such vehemence that we didn't see elsewhere? But I personally don't know the answer. I know that the experience in the different sectors was not the same. The Italian occupation was not as vigorous, let's say, as what it was in the Bulgarian and the German sectors. And I know that both from Mezzauer's book and from anecdotally from people that I've heard from. But it was terrible, and I think the numbers are that Greece per capita lost more people to starvation than any other country in the war, including Russia, which lost huge numbers.
Open up to any questions. Manny?
Terrific. Really, really good, Jim.
Identify yourself, Manny.
Yeah, Manny Ravelis, a lawyer from down the street, and really excellently done. How did they assure that the Germans didn't grab all the supplies when the supplies showed up?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think I don't know exactly the answer to that one either, Manny, but I think that because of that arrangement that got made through the Swedish and Swiss Red Crosses, they felt they needed to play by the rules, at least to some extent, and most of the food got through.
Julia Panovia-Cloney. Was ever the American aid, the Article 4, TL 40 and so on, ever contributed to the volunteering part, to the Greek war relief?
Not that I'm aware of, Julia. If I understood your question correctly, this was completely a private initiative that didn't have any kind of public support. Did I understand your question correctly?
That's my question, because I heard that later some school programs, food for students, was somehow financed by the American, and that's my question, whether ever.
I've never seen any reference to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Leon Andrews, board member of AHI. Nice job, Tim. I'm interested in the food. You mentioned wheat as what food? How is it? Was it prepared? I mean, are we talking the more modern days of the required refrigeration, or was it just mostly
No, it was
wheat and bread?
mostly cereals that went in canvas type sacks that could be easily loaded and distributed. But I can quote you the contents of these food packages that sold for $12.75.
Each one costs $12.75. The package.
That's how much the package cost to
35
send,
pounds,
which
though.
included the shipping and everything. Yeah, it was about 35 pounds. It was 5 pounds of spaghetti, 5 pounds of coffee, 3 cans of spiced ham, 3 cans of evaporated milk, 2 cans of spaghetti dinners, 1 can of maple syrup, half a pound of tea, half a pound of cocoa, package of crackers, pound of dried milk, 2 pounds of spry, 2 pounds of sugar, pound of canned fish, 22 ounces of chicken noodle soup, 20 ounces of Quaker oats, 28 ounces of cream of wheat. I don't know why they got more. 2 packages of dehydrated chicken soup, 8 ounces of soap, and a package of razor blades.
Wow.
Yeah, William Camarino's. This was an extremely well organized and a very highly efficient organization. What became of it? Did it just go out of existence, or did it go to some other purpose?
It got merged into CARE.
Okay.
And I think after about the mid-50s, it ceased operations because its purposes have been accomplished, and you recall the Marshall Plan in Greece
Right.
also kicked in and helped considerably.
Susan Spencer. I was wondering how the number of people who died of starvation in Athens compared to the rural areas where people could grow their own vegetables and fruit and things.
I don't have exact figures, but it wasn't nearly as bad in the rural areas. And, we're experiencing the same thing in Greece today. The rural areas aren't doing quite as badly as the big cities, but where people could farm, they could still eat. And I know, again, by things in Mazauer's book and things
Yeah.
I've heard from people who lived through that time, that it was very tough. Interestingly, here's an anecdote. The monks of Mount Athos knew that war was coming, and they socked away all kinds of supplies. And when I was there in 1976 for the first time, they told me they were still eating some of those supplies.
It was still bad nonetheless. If I can just take an example from my father, who recounted stories to me over the years, who just passed away about a year ago at 89 years old, and who lived during the occupation of Greece on the island, which is about as rural as you can get, and surrounded by water. It said it was very, very bad. If there was any semblance of any kind of bread, it would be locked up like it was gold. Even among family members, it became an issue. So yeah, it was a problem also in the rural areas as well. But certainly not to the degree where if you have complete concrete structures and not much you can do in the middle of cities.
Or on
But-
the islands they could fish and things
But that's
like
another
that.
point, though. I've read, Jim, and I don't know if you know of this or anyone in the audience may be aware of this, regarding the Germans. I read somewhere recently that the Germans also put out a notice that no one is to fish. Are you familiar with that?
I wasn't aware of that.
I read it in in one of the books I was reading recently. So again, you would think with Greece being surrounded by water and the potential to fish for for food.
They also probably were concerned about people sneaking in and out on small fishing boats.
Well, it made it sound like they were not allowed even from shore. To what degree, of course, they can patrol that is a different story, but I'm sure that took place. They can't cover every part of the shoreline. Greece has more of a coastal shore than the United States does. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the interesting and thoughtful presentation. Once the food arrived in Greece, who took care of the distribution within the country? Wasn't the Communist Party also trying to take over the government at that time, and the political situation was in turmoil?
I wasn't aware of any political influence. There was a pre-existing committee when the war broke out. There was a committee that was composed of American relief workers and educational people who at first were responsible for coordinating the distribution of supplies. Once the Swedish and Swiss Red Cross agencies took over, their functions ceased, as I understand it, and the International Red Cross committees took over. And I'm not aware of any political interference that took place. It seems like it was a pretty well-run operation, and the food got where it was supposed to go.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm Tim Corcoran. I'm Jim's partner. Jim, why? Most of the other places that the Germans went, they tried to they tried to kill everybody. For example, not only did they try to kill the Jews, they tried to kill all the Slavs too. They just happened to be number 2 on the list, right? But they evidently weren't trying to kill all the Greeks. They just wanted to subordinate.
The Slavs, the Serbs in particular, fought back very vehemently and suffered as a result. And Greece suffered terribly too. The German occupation never actually succeeded in the most mountainous parts of Greece. The resistance was always quite effective in the mountains and would come down into the villages and do what it needed to do. But the reprisals were horrific.
Brutal.
And entire villages would be wiped out. Men, women, and children for shielding people or protecting them or whatever. So it was vicious, and a lot of people died. And there's a village in Greece called
That's what
it begins with
Vistamo.
which almost was completely wiped out, and is still known to this day in Greece as the village that suffered horrifically for what it did.
matter of fact, this Vistamo story. If you're a fan of military shows, as I was, the famous combat series of the 1960s, Rick Morrow, they actually referred to Vistamo in one of their episodes. This was well-known massacre of an entire entire village. Matt, did you have another question?
Yeah, just 2 quick ones. The first one is, are you distributing this paper in some way? Is it going to be on the website?
Since it's prepared remarks, we will attach it to our press release when we put out the press release on this event.
Okay. And secondly, have you had a chance to kind of distill your history there for its relevance to what's going on in Greece now?
Well, no, but I haven't done that many, but I was pleased to see in the HEPA press release just this morning, and I made a copy because I thought this might come up. It says that a shipping container filled with $650,000 worth of medical supplies and equipment arrived October 21 in Athens, thanks to the efforts of HEPA and the International Orthodox Christian Charity. So it's good to see that American concern for what's going on in Greece is still there.
Was the HEPA the catalyst?
I couldn't tell from this press release.
No, I'm talking about
No, it wasn't. But the existence of the HEPA network allowed the word to get out very quickly. But it was Spiros Skouras, who was the head of
20th century.
20th century, who really galvanized everybody and pulled in a lot of his Hollywood buddies and got it going really fast.
Also, Tom Pappas on the East Coast was very much involved.
That's right.
This is so interesting to me. Those were my university years. I remember all the war release things we did. But we were given to understand that the Germans, because they considered themselves a superior race, sort of did a parallel that they were the ancient Greeks who were also superior, and that this somehow figured in their mentality as to how they would treat the Greeks, and were maybe disappointed. That was a common notion.
The occupation was brutal,
Yeah.
but it began when the Greek army finally surrendered in northern Greece, and the German army commended them for their bravery.
Yeah.
They had never seen an adversary like that to that point, and they knew what they were up against. But that admiration and any sense of fellow Aryanism disappeared very quickly.
They were disappointed that the Greeks stood up to them, or something like that.
Well, they were disappointed, sure, but they were also amazed and startled, and they could respect a worthy adversary. But I don't know whether it was because of that or not. I think it was because of the nature of the resistance in Greece that the reprisals were so.
So they weren't particularly mad at the Greeks for. I mean, if they treated them more harshly than they treated others.
I can't say for sure, Bessie, but I think that the nature of the Greek resistance was itself more vigorous than many of the others, and it engendered a more vigorous response.
Well, I think even Hitler said that the resistance from the civilian population that he encountered in Greece, and specifically in Crete, took 10 days to capture Crete, for crying out loud. Some countries fell in less than a week. 10 days for Crete, he had never seen, or certainly the German army had never seen up to that point. And I would have to say that there had to be some of that came through in terms of the reprisals that we're talking about. All right. Well, this is another. Nonetheless, again, this is a tremendous story, a story that needs to be continuously brought to the forefront regarding what Greece did. And the elements, there are just so many elements involved here. And for the interest of maybe of some of the individuals in the room today who are not aware, I think it is important to make one other point regarding the Greek war resistance against fascism in that period. And that's the religious figures, Archbishop of Athens and all of Greece, Damaskinos, and the efforts that he made regarding to save the Greek Jewry, which was significant. Although there was a large percentage of Jewry that was lost in Greece, not because of what Greece didn't try to help in that regard. And he made a special effort. He was the first major religious figures in all of Europe to really stand up and speak up against this atrocity when no one else was doing so. And he made it a point to try to change baptismal certificates and other such official documents, and to try to change the names of the Jews of Greece, to more Greek-sounding names. And we need to speak also of the Metropolitan Chrysostomos of Zakynthos, when the the German commander came and asked him to produce a list of all the Jews of the island. He and the mayor of the island came together, and the next day came to the German commander and produced a list of 2 names, their own. And it was astounding, a feat of heroic proportions, really. And 275, I believe, were the Jews of Zakynthos, and all of them were saved because of this particular action. And again, these are just small vignettes of a whole tremendous things that the Greek people, the Greek nation did as a whole in resisting this fascism force in the early 1940s. And there's one other point, and you heard me say earlier about the 23 divisions. Well, those 23 divisions were tied up in the Balkans because he had to keep them there because of the fierce resistance by the Greek Adartas and others, including also the partisans in Yugoslavia. Those 23 divisions could not be used in Normandy and in France. And again, you can speculate, but who knows if they were able to divert those divisions to France. They were not, because they were needed in the Balkans. And again, little old Greece, even in occupation, was constantly fighting Nazi forces day in and day out. So the reprisals that were talked about here today in terms of leading to this famine, I think, is probably one of the reasons why. Let me just finish by, I'll read a quote here. Before I do, I'd like to recognize Olympia Neocleos, who's the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Cyprus Embassy, representing the Ambassador. Thank you for being here today. Mr. Konstantinos Kyriou, who is the Counsel at the Greek Embassy, representing the Ambassador. And the press attaché from the Greek Embassy is here. We have the defense attachés and of the Greek Embassy, including the naval attaché and so forth. So thank you for being here today. Let me finish by reading a quote from our AHIF conference that we held, that I alluded to earlier, about 12 years ago so, on the contributions of Greece. I'll read the quote and I'll tell you who said it at the end. As the years pass, it becomes more and more necessary to recall and record for new generations just how the people of Greece, alone or with allies, gained and held for their country for a century and more the independence and democracy it possesses today. And how in one special moment in history, Greece at heavy cost and sacrifice, and with great courage and determination, played a pivotal role in World War II in defying the forces of tyranny and Axis aggression that were arrayed against not only Greece, but the whole of Western civilization. It is an inspiring story. General Andrew J. Goodpaster, U.S. Army, former Supreme Commander of NATO. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here today to help us commemorate this very important day in world history. We look forward to having you with us on one of our next noon forums. And if you happen to be in Miami on November 22, 23, we're going to do our 12th annual Hellenism, Future of Hellenism Conference in America. Thanks again. We have some light refreshments in the back, and have a great afternoon.
You can always learn a lot.
Sure.
Greeks higher in the racial hierarchy.